Sensei Masao Kawasoe is acknowledged to be one of the finest karate technicians ever to emerge from Japan. A graduate of the world-famous Japan Karate Association instructors class, he now lives in London. He is in considerable demand in Europe, where he spends much of his time, though he travels worldwide to teach. In the first program of this series, Sensei Kawasoe demonstrates in his own style the concepts and technical ideals to be learnt as a beginner in Shotokan Karate. The late chief instructor of the JKA, Master Nakayama, said of Kawasoe, "Through his mastery of Kihon basics, he has come to a level few achieve. His technique inspires all who see it to strive for the highest ideals of Shotokan Karate." Karate originated on the islands of Okinawa and was later developed in Japan and has been spread throughout the world by the Japanese. For this reason, we observe Japanese etiquette and behavior while practicing karate. At the start and finish of each training session, the class will always line up, kneel and bow to the class instructor, who while in class is always referred to as sensei. As with all sport, it is important to prepare for your training with warm-up exercises. These warm-up exercises we'll see will help develop flexibility and reach and reduce the possibility of strains and damage to muscles. It is important to use these exercises within your own physical limitations. Start moderately, and as you progress in karate, so your suppleness, strength, and dexterity will improve. Work to your own limits, but always try to realize your own maximum potential. The exercises should be done slowly and smoothly without any sudden or jerky movements. You should never attempt to train without first thoroughly warming up. It is always best that you exercise in a warm environment, as this will help to prevent muscles seizing or cramping. Initially, students' muscles are unaccustomed to these stretching exercises, and the student may find many of the postures quite difficult at first. Many of the exercise postures are also karate stances and should be regularly practiced to help to develop form and style. Here we have Kibadachi, or straddle stance, Zenkutsudachi, or forward stance, and Kokutsudachi, or back stance. In Kibadachi, it is important to keep a straight back and not to lean forward. Here in Zenkutsudachi, Sensei Kawasoe practices the hip twist and focusing of the hips. These are very important in developing all blocking and punching techniques. All of the basic forward-facing movements in Shotokan karate, that is, blocks, punches, and kicks, are practiced in Zenkutsudachi, or forward stance. Note how the head is always at the same height, and how, on moving, the hips are pushed forward over the knee. 60% of the body weight should be over the front foot. Try to root your stance by focusing your hips on completion of each movement. Do not roll through into your next movement. The rear foot must be kept flat to the floor. The mawate, or turn, is used in the basic drill movement exercises in the dojo. Note the length and width of the stance does not alter on completion of the turn. Chokazuki, or straight punch, is the basic punching technique in Shotokan karate. One of the elemental things to learn is making a fist. Start with your little finger first. There should be no spaces in the completed fist. Your wrist should be straight at all times, as this can lead to weakness and also ensures that the correct part of the fist, the knuckles of the middle and index finger, strike the target. You should practice this movement regularly so that making a fist correctly becomes a reflex action. When punching, the opposite arm should be pulled back to form an upturned fist at the hip. This reaction movement will help to develop speed and strength to the punching technique. Practice this reaction movement, making sure you keep the elbows close to the body and the shoulders level. You should always strike to the center line of the body, twisting your wrist on contact and focusing your body weight behind the technique. Practice these movements slowly. This will help to develop kime, or focus. You should then gradually increase the speed and power. It is important that the body does not lean back from the waist on punching, and that the fist always returns to the hip. Note how the body, particularly the shoulders, are relaxed prior to the delivery of the technique. Remember, tension inhibits speed and delivery. Keep the shoulders down, focusing the muscles of the shoulder and body behind the technique. Chokazuki, or straight punch, when applied, moving forward. This is known as oizuki, or lunge punch. Here, Sensei Kawasoe demonstrates the technique while moving forward in the previously practiced Zenkutsudachi, the rear leg driving the hips forward. Note that the same punching position is maintained. Punching to the center of the body. Body and shoulders are square throughout the forward stepping movement. Focus the delivery of the punch as the front foot lands. Chokazuki, when delivered in the opposite side to the leading leg, is known as gyakuzuki, or reverse punch. Reverse punch is usually used as a counter punch. Initially, it is used from a static position, and then, as the student progresses, from more fluid and variable stances. Again, it is important to pull back the opposite hand sharply to increase the speed and power of the technique. The twisting and focusing of the hips as the punch is delivered is achieved by locking the back leg and focusing the body weight behind the punch. Note too that the knee does not wobble when delivering the technique. Gidan Barai, or downward block. This is used to defend the lower part of the body. The block is focused on completion of the downward movement, with the twisting action of each arm. Basic training techniques are practiced in drill form during training. Gidan Barai is used to start the drill sequence and the turn. It is important to note that the fist travels from the opposite shoulder, short movements are weak and ineffective. As with all blocks when moving in Zenkutsudachi, the body and hips are pivoted to 45 degrees to add power to the movement. At the same time, the opposite hand is pulled sharply back in preparation for a counterpunch. Agiyuki, or rising block, is used to block attacks to the face and head. The fist and forearm travel upward and across the face and not in a semicircular movement. A good practice is to cut through your rising forearm with your descending opposite hand. This keeps your block in front of your face. As with all of the forward-facing blocks, the hips twist at 45 degrees when moving. Note the coordination of the legs, hips, and arms. Sotoyuke, or outside block. This is used to block to the middle or chest section of the body, with the twist of the hands as the block is completed, using the kimi of the body and shoulders. Again, as with all of the blocks, the hips twist at 45 degrees. The fist is kept at shoulder height and well forward, not too close to the body. A common difficulty for beginners. The blocking area, as with Gidan Barai and Agiyuki, is the outside edge of the wrist and forearm. Uchiyuki, or inside block. Again, blocking to the chest, the arm travels across the body and outward, using the inside edge of the wrist and forearm. When the student becomes more proficient, this technique is used to slip inside an opponent's punch, then counterpunch. The fist should be strongly clenched throughout all of these blocking techniques. Again, remembering to focus the shoulders and hips. Here, as with the outside block, the fist is kept at shoulder height and not too close to the body. Shutoyuke, the knife hand block. This block is carried out with open hand, the blocking area being the blade of the hand and forearm. The wrist is kept straight with the thumb tight against the outer edge of the hand. Shutoyuke is usually practiced in kokutsudachi or backstands. in which 70% of the body weight is kept over the back leg. Unlike Zenkutsudachi, both feet are kept in line. The opposite hand is now pulled back to the solar plexus, palm upwards. As for downward block, the blocking hand comes up to the opposite shoulder before blocking. When turning in Shutoyuke, pivot, then transfer the weight to your back foot as you turn. Sambon Kumite, or free attack sparring. This is the student's introduction to sparring, utilizing the basic blocking and punching techniques shown previously. The sparring practice should be carried out lightly at first, concentrating on direction and technique, building up your speed and power, both in your blocks and punches. The drill may be practiced as 3-attack or 5-attack sparring. 3-attack sparring is not initially taught to the student karateka immediately after the tuition of blocks and punches, but is here being demonstrated in relation to the application of the previously shown blocks and punches. Often the sparring develops into a routine. This should be avoided, as the defender will often move in anticipation of the attack. It is the job of the attacker to control the speed and rhythm of the practice. Spirit and attitude are imperative at this stage. The loud shout that is made as the punch is delivered is ki. This is the focusing of the body's weight and energy behind the technique as the breath is expelled. On the final attack, when blocking and counter-punching, use the twist of the hips and shoulders as well as pulling back the opposite hand to create speed and power. The blocking arm is strongly focused before being pulled back to the hip. Do not lean forward on delivering the punch. When facing your opponent for sparring or training, you should always show respect to your opponent with a standing bow, both before and after a sequence. As we have seen, punching techniques are known as zuke, blocking techniques as yuke, and now kicking techniques or geri. There are two basic kicking methods in karate. Kiyage, in which you snap the kick, and kikomi, or thrust kick. First, mai geri, or front snap kick. Make sure the upper body is relaxed at all times during the kick. Try not to tense up as you deliver the kick. The supporting leg should be kept bent. As with all kicks, the knee comes up first. The kick is then snapped out. Remember, the knee must come up sharply. The hips are used to add power to this snapping action. Correct balance is essential. With this attack, the striking area is the ball of the foot with the toes turned back. Note how the bent supporting leg is used to drive the hips forward. Again, these formal exercises are carried out in Zenkutsudachi. Yokogeri kikomi, or side thrust kick. As with all kicks, the knee comes up first. However, this time, the leg is thrust out from the raised knee stance and locked out to the side. Note how the supporting foot pivots as the hips thrust into the kick. The kicking leg is retracted without dropping the knee. The movements for these kicking techniques are initially carried out in kibadachi, or straddle stance. In kibadachi, the karateka moves sideways. Stepping past the leading leg, the weight is equally distributed. The knees should be bent and slightly inclined inward. Only the head is turned in the direction of the kick. The side of the foot is used as the striking area in all of the side kicks. Yokogeri kiyage, or side snap kick. Again, the knee comes up first. The hips are pushed in the direction of the kick instead of pivoting and twisting the hips as in the side thrust kick. The leg is snapped out from the raised knee position and snapped back. This kick is generally considered a close quarter quick reaction technique. Do not incline your body on raising your knee prior to snapping or thrusting your kick, as this will lead to poor balance. Here is a useful training exercise to practice with your training partner. Using his supporting arm, aim the side thrust kick into the armpit of his gi, pivoting on your leg and making distance. Then snap your kick against the underarm of your partner's gi as a variation in a shorter distance technique. Don't lean forward from the waist when practicing side kick. Learn to keep the body as near upright as possible. Use your training partner to help you correct your form and stances. It is the purity of Sensei's teaching that has brought him such international recognition, demonstrating the basic katas in a new light, not through the introduction of changes, but by interpreting them in their original form. Kihon kata is the first kata taught to new students. The kata is always named before starting. Kihon kata. Kata has been described as the soul of karate, being a sequence of predetermined movements. They should be strictly adhered to. These movements are either blocks or attacks against imaginary opponents, and are one of the assessment methods by which karateka are graded.
基本から。基本型。
In this series, all kata should be practiced at the correct pace, as Sensei Kawasoe now explains.
Many Western students hurry their kata. Every technique must be finished. Push the knee over the foot when driving forward into lunge punch or downward block. There should be no body movement first. When turning in the opposite direction, make sure the hip on the back leg is pulled back before turning. Keep the back straight. Do not lean forward.
As the student karateka progresses, so he should begin to understand more about karate. The student should be aware that he is defending himself against 4 opponents, that the kata is not a dance, and that it must be performed with kime and spirit.
Clear, Shalom. 해야 할 사람?
The front foot should be pulled back as the hand is disengaged before counter-attacking with hammer fist. Strike to the face or collarbone. When turning into back stance, the knee is pushed forward before making the knife hand block. Again, remember to keep the back straight. Do not lean forward.